Ever get the feeling some mysteries just kind of draw you in,
Yeah.
like begging to be picked apart? Well, today we're going deep on one that still have aviation experts stumped. The whole Stardust vanishing act.
Yeah, and this isn't just about a plane going down. It's about clues showing up decades later, how we forecast weather, or how much we've learned about it, I guess, and how even now some things just stay mysteries.
Right. Okay, so picture this. 1947, August 2nd to be exact.
Mhm.
BSAA, flight CS-59, supposed to be routine, London to Santiago, Chile. Their plane, this Avro Lancastrian airliner they called Stardust, it's on that last leg, over the Andes, and poof.
And poof is right. What gets me is this wasn't some flimsy aircraft. The Avro Lancastrian, that was a converted bomber, known to be reliable. And get this, their pilot, Captain Reginald Cook, basically a legend RAF, tons of experience.
So this experienced pilot, reliable plane. What else do we know, like, about those final moments?
Well, the Stardust last anyone heard was 5:41 p.m. Routine message to Santiago saying they were right on time for their 5:45 arrival. Then, nothing.
And they just went silent.
Yeah.
No distress calls, nothing.
Nothing at all. It's like they flew into a cloud and disappeared.
No wonder people came up with all sorts of theories for 50 years. They searched all over those mountains. But that plane, those 6 passengers, 5 crew, just gone.
Gone. And when something like that happens, people talk. Was it sabotage? What about that King's messenger on board carrying secret documents? Heck, some even said UFOs. Shows you what happens when there are no answers.
UFOs. Come on. People let their imaginations run wild. Although speaking of wild, 1998, right? Climbers on Mount Tupungato, they find something. Not your typical mountain gear either. It was pieces of a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. The same engine is on the Stardust.
You said it, wild. After all that time, finally a real lead. And it gets better, believe it or not. In 2000, another expedition. They find even more of the wreckage, even a whole wheel with the tires still inflated. Can you imagine? After 50 years under ice?
Talk about a blast from the past.
But did the wreckage tell them anything? Like, was it a bomb, engine trouble, or did they just clip the mountain and that was that? Well, here's the thing. All the wreckage, it was pretty much in one spot. That told them it wasn't some midair explosion or a slow descent. Nope, this was a high-speed crash straight into that mountain.
So full speed into a mountain. But how does a pilot like that, with Captain Cook's record, how does that even happen?
The million-dollar question, right? This is where things go from hard facts to, well, educated guesses. And the most likely answer, if you look at what we know now, is something that back then was a bit of a mystery itself, the jet stream.
Okay, the jet stream. Now we're getting to the good stuff. But fill me in here. How does the jet stream play into this whole thing?
You're right, it's a big piece of the puzzle. See, back then, 1947, we're talking about a time when understanding weather, high altitude weather, especially, well, it wasn't like it is today.
Got it.
Pilots like Captain Cook, they didn't have the means to know what this jet stream was gonna do. Not accurately anyway. It's like they were flying blind into, well, a force of nature.
So what are we talking about here? I mean, when I think jet stream, I think, I don't know, bad hair days on a plane. What am I missing?
Think of it like a river, but up high, way up high, and instead of water, it's wind. And this wind, it can really move, sometimes over 100 miles an hour. Easy.
Okay, so there's this powerful wind up there.
Now, over the Andes, where the Stardust was, that wind usually blows east. So they're flying right into it, a huge headwind they've got.
So even though their instruments are saying one thing, this wind's pushing against them, slowing them down without them knowing.
Exactly. Add in the navigation tools they had back then, not exactly GPS. And yeah, they could have been way off course and not even realize it.
Wow.
And remember that propeller they found? Engine was at cruising speed when they hit. Landing gear was still up too, meaning Captain Cook, he didn't see that mountain coming, not till the last second anyway.
They were that close to Santiago, maybe even starting their descent, and had no idea they were headed straight for a mountain, hidden in the clouds. Man, it makes you think twice about complaining about a little turbulence, doesn't it?
Right. Nature can be beautiful and brutal, all at once. And while we can't know for sure what was going on in those final minutes, this jet stream idea, it just seems to fit. Although there are some of Captain Cook's fellow pilots, I think, who, well, they disagree.
They do.
They knew him, flew with him, and they say he was as cautious as they come, a top-notch pilot. Tough for them to believe he'd make that kind of mistake.
So it's not open and shut then?
Nope. And that's why it's so important to look at these things from all sides. Take, for example, that Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 back in 1972.
I've heard of that.
Same mountains, eerily similar situation, but some of them survived.
Really? Wow, the same mountains, same circumstances basically, but that turned out so differently. It really does make you think.
It does, and that story, the alive story as they call it, really shows you how unpredictable these things can be, even with what we know about the jet stream now. Although, speaking of things that make you think...
We haven't even gotten to the big one yet, have we?
Stendek.
Stendek. That's right, Stendek. Can't talk about the Stardust without mentioning that. For those who maybe missed an episode or two, what was that message, and why is it such a big deal?
So right before they go silent, the Stardust radio's in, and the message is, Ita Santiago, 17.45 HRS Stendek. Now the first part, that's standard, giving their arrival time. But that last part, Stendek, nobody had ever heard of it. No pilot, no operator, it wasn't in any aviation books.
And so everyone starts coming up with their own explanations, I'm guessing?
Oh, for sure. Everyone had a theory. Some thought, well, maybe the radio operator was having trouble, hypoxia when you don't get enough oxygen, can mess with your thinking.
Makes sense.
Others, they wondered, what if it's a code? Like an anagram or something. Some folks even tried rearranging the letters to spell descent, but nothing really panned out.
So what are we left with? If those wilder ideas are out, what's the most likely reason for this Stendek business?
It's funny how sometimes the simplest explanation, well, it's usually the right one. Remember, back then, they used Morse code, those dots and dashes. And even a tiny mistake, like a mistimed dash or something, can completely change the message.
Oh, right. So you're saying it was just a mistake. Like they meant to say one thing, but those dots and dashes got jumbled up. And Stendek, that's just what came out the other end.
It very well could be. Experts, they looked at the Morse code for Stendek, right? And it's awfully similar to SCTIAR if you factor in a little human error, a slip of the wrist on the telegraph key, that kind of thing.
And just so we're clear, SCTIAR is...
That's the code for Santiago Airport, SCTI, and AR, that's the abbreviation for over, makes perfect sense in the context of their message. Just a routine check-in.
Okay, that does sound like the simplest explanation.
Yeah.
But what about that whole thing? I read somewhere that the operator, they sent Stendek twice. Doesn't that kind of rule out a simple mistake?
Not necessarily. Think about it. Even pros, they make mistakes, especially under pressure. Plus, radio conditions back then, not always crystal clear.
Right.
There's also another idea, although maybe not as likely. Remember how we were talking about the jet stream and how it could blow them off course?
Yeah.
Well, what if Stendek, again, allowing for a little Morse code hiccup, what if it was actually supposed to be VALP?
VALP, like,
Yeah.
hold on. Valparaiso, the coastal city.
Bingo! They've got an airport there too. So if the Stardust is fighting that jet stream, they might actually be closer to Valparaiso than Santiago.
And not even know it.
Exactly. So they accidentally send the wrong airport code.
It really makes you think. I mean, this whole thing, it's like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. You think you've got it figured out, then bam, another twist.
That's what makes it so intriguing though, right? The Stardust, it reminds us that even with all our fancy technology, all our knowledge, some mysteries, well, they just might stay mysteries. We can look at the evidence, weigh different ideas, but sometimes the best we can do is say, we might never know for sure.
It's kind of humbling, isn't it? We like to think we've got it all figured out,
But nature has a way of keeping some things to itself.
you got that right. And that message, that Stendek, maybe it's one of those things.
It just might be. Although, you could also argue that the fact we're still thinking about it, talking about it, trying to solve it, that keeps the memory of those aboard the Stardust alive. And that maybe is the most important thing of all.
Well said. And that's all the time we have for today. Join us next time as we take another deep dive into another captivating mystery from the past. Until then, keep exploring. You never know what you might uncover.